Hello and welcome to the Cardiff Central podcast, where we're dealing with the unfamiliar feeling of defeat this week. The Blue and Blacks kicked off the European Challenge Cup campaign with a loss at Stade Francais on Saturday. We'll be discussing whether the team selection was right and what positives there are to take. Plus, the Rags lose again, Ulster next week, the return of more prodigal sons, and Simon's tales from Paris. Joining me on the panel this week is Simon Jones, back from Paris. Simon, how are you?
Bonjour, mes amis. That's as far as my French is going. That's more French than I used all weekend.
Andrew Ford, Fordy, how are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, mate.
And Fraser Stroud, Fraser, how are you?
Yeah, not bad, thanks.
Good stuff. Right, we'll get straight into the action from Saturday then. Cardiff kicked off their European Challenge Cup campaign with a 38-17 loss away at Stade Francais at the Stade Jean Bouin. A much changed blue and black side actually went in 5-10 up at the break after tries from Ewan Stevens and Matty Young, but rather predictably a strong home bench ran away with it in the second half. Before we get on to the rugby, Simon, give us your top travel tips from Paris that you've picked up over the weekend. How good a trip was it?
Yeah, I was just saying, it's a long way from Cardiff. I don't know why. It seems a stupid thing to say, but when we got on the train on Saturday morning, full of excitement to go on the Eurostar, that was all fine. We got there about 6 o'clock, but then the train ride back on Sunday seemed to just take forever. But yeah, it was a good trip. It's a lovely ground. It's purpose built for them. You just get the feel that if Cardiff had the money to create something like that of that size, really well branded. Interestingly, the PSG shop is in their ground, round the kind of back of it. But yeah, just it was a really good. We walked about 10 miles on Saturday around because we went to see PSG in the evening, and they didn't kick off till 9 o'clock. So we had quite a few hours to kill in between the games. But yeah, lovely ground, really great fan base as well. I think I put on the chat at the end. We kind of left our bit and walked round behind the post to stand there, and all the Stade Francais like supporters club were chanting for Cardiff as the players came round and clapped and were like throwing down their mobiles and having selfies with them. So it was a really nice atmosphere there. It was very kind of friendly. It's just a great trip. It is a really great trip. But yeah, hopefully at some point Cardiff gets the money and can create something like that. I realised it was 18 years ago today to when I last went, which was I think 2007
Mhm.
when Nicky Robertson went off injured after about 5 minutes and Jason Spice played fly half for that. And we lost 12-6, but I distinctly remember being really pleased with it because we got a losing bonus point, and I think we turned them over the weekend afterwards and qualified out of the group, and that losing bonus point was really important. But I've got a rant about the way in which Europe's structured now, and that's not being allowed to play them again. But yeah, a great trip, couple of days back now, so it's all a distant memory in the rain of Cardiff. But
It sounds like an excellent Paris sporting day that with PSG in the night
it
as well.
was, and we went to Roland Garros
Nice.
just to have a look, not to have a set or a knock up or anything.
Coming back with clay on your legs.
Yeah,
We'll get into the action then. A couple of three-word thoughts at final whistle on the weekend. Stephen said good first half. Ben said Botham Man Mountain. And then quite a lot of comments on sort of the average age of the Cardiff team, which obviously included quite a lot of young lads and debutants. Rob went with too many kids, channeling his inner Alan Hansen. But the others are a little bit more positive. Charlie went for exposure for youngsters. Gareth, our academy rules. Sean said hope for future. David, plenty of positives. And Daniel went with lots of promise. Simon, we'll come to you first for your view from inside the stadium. What were your general thoughts of the game?
I think at half time, I think we contained them so well in that first half. I don't know whether Stad took it a bit easy and thought it was going to be, a bit of a walkover. Obviously, they got a penalty after about 3 seconds, and you think, oh, here we go, and they kick to the corner, and an unbelievable tackle from Bevan, and then from both them to hold them up. But actually, everything they threw at us, we handled pretty well. They eventually got the try, but even that was a bit of a strike from some distance. And then we could have had a few more scores in that first half. I think is it Emmanuel just releases the ball a little bit early? Was it Emmanuel down the wing to Bevan and gives Bevan a little bit too much to do.
I want to say it was Elijah Evans, I
Was it
think,
Elijah
when he was
Evans?
on
Yeah,
for Grady. Yeah.
yeah. So that was, that pass goes literally like a second, 2 seconds later. I think Bevan's in. I think it was another one where the ball was like hacked through. Schmidt made that burst and looked left and didn't look right, which just seems really strange not to even look at who's on your inside. So I got to half time and thought, well, actually, considering the inexperience of the side and then losing Lloyd as well, we can put up a fight here. And then I think we never recovered from conceding that first try. I think in the second half there was like a defensive misread that just allowed one of their players to go through, and then like almost a second misread that allowed them to score. And from that moment on, I think that's where the lack of experience kind of came in. We needed to bring on somebody just to control bad ball. And I think my view is Wild was left a little bit exposed on that bad ball and not quite sure what to do with it. And we fell away, and it was a real shame because I genuinely feel if we'd had a Sheedy or a Ben Thomas on the bench, we might well have controlled that, or an Ali Davis controlled that game a little bit better than we did. And I'm not saying we would have won it, but because I think they obviously probably got a stern word at half time about what they were doing because they weren't doing anything to actually get through us. But I think we would have caused them more problems. They would have been worried much later in the game. So, as I said, I haven't watched the second half back because I can't really face it. Because I think that first half is one of the best halves I've seen us have this season, if you consider the age of some of the players. And I think that inexperience just told a little bit in the second half. But it's a good experience for them all. Certainly weren't kind of embarrassed out there. Very, very competitive. But as you said, their bench and their quality just kind of told in the end. But I don't think we were really outmuscled either, which is good to see. So yeah, half full glass. It feels a bit like the one that got away, but there was nothing else we could do in that situation.
Fordy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree on the whole with Simon. Watching the first half, I kind of couldn't believe what was going on. Like, because there was a lot of, I wouldn't say it was luck, but a lot of stuff was kind of falling quite well for us. I think that in that first minute, that Botham try, save and tackle, that is absolutely heroic. There's no luck to it whatsoever, but he times that literally 0.2 seconds slower and he's not getting there. I don't know how Stade Francais haven't scored there. But I really admired how kind of composed a lot of the youngsters looked. Like they seemed, particularly Matty Young. I thought Matty Young played really well on debut. Um, and it was annoying to see it kind of all fall apart. And again, I agree with Simon that it was kind of that momentum. As soon as they started conceding one or two, it kind of almost each try became worse, kind of defensive reads wise. But it was kind of to be expected. But yeah, I do agree that it'd have been nice to see maybe a little bit more fight in that second half and try and get a little bit closer. But overall, I'd say it's something positive to look back on.
Fraser?
Yeah, I agree with Fordy and Simon in general. I think, yeah, the first half was weird. It was weird. I was kind of surprised we were winning at half time, and I don't know. I think they came close to scoring a couple of times, and yeah, we did the last ditch defense, which throughout the game was pretty impressive. Um, I thought, yeah, Harry Ward did have a difficult time, but like two of his passes on the tries we scored were really good. He's got a really good passing range. He's got look at that. That is one of his big skills, I think. And yeah, we played pretty well in the first half, and like yeah, went in half time, went in, which was delightful. But yeah, the second half was very odd. I think we were giving away a few penalties in the first half, like silly, sloppy penalties, and I think that just kind of continued. And we did the thing where like compounding errors and giving Stade Francais a lot of their tries in the second half were just from silly reads or bad decisions. I think like not competing in the air or not protecting the ruck, and then all of a sudden they've scored, good tries. They're a good team, so they can, if they give them opportunity, they'll take it, and they did in the second half. But I was a little bit confused. Like our structure seemed to really disappear in the second half, like attacking and defensively, and I'm not really sure where that came from. But I guess it is just inexperience and not, the subs coming on and just having such a mix and match team that we weren't really clear as to how we were playing, and like for some reason the structure wasn't working, which is a bit unusual because they were so yeah, it looked quite disorganised at times. Um, but yeah, there were some good performances. I think Evan Lloyd was good. Yeah, Matty Young had a great debut. Uh, what's his name? The centre, Professor Cornell Smith. Uh, he was okay, but yeah, can't look to his right for some reason. But yeah, I think it was. I was a little bit disappointed, but I think that's just expectations. I've just seen Cardiff win over and over again, so it's like really, and the fact that would we were in the game, but kind of at the end soundly beaten was a little bit deflating, I suppose. But it's to be expected with all the changes and the youth that we had in our team. So yeah, there are definitely positives coming out from it.
I think you're dead right that it's weird that we've become kind of used to Cardiff now to managing things quite well in the second half. It's not something we've done really for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden this year, Ali Davis has nailed down that role, and you've had Sheedy and Lloyd at 10 and Ben Thomas at 12. And all of a sudden on Saturday, you end up with Ian Davis debut 21 at scrum half. Harry Wild pretty much debut as he only had like 30 seconds against Zebra the week before, 20. Stefan Manuel 19. Cornel Schmidt only been at the club about 3 weeks at outside centre. Young 20 at fullback also on debut. And they looked there was a lot of to like about all of them. There was good moments, but they looked like lads who were playing like some of their first senior games, and you just thought there was moments when we were kicking the ball in that second half where you think, Ali Davis would have put his foot on this ball here, maybe taken another phase, got three forwards in
Yeah.
and kicked it quite
Yeah,
nicely. And when the ball comes back to Wild at fly half, you think, all right, if this is Sheedy or Lloyd, this is going long, and we're going to push them back and chase them, and they kick to compete. And I mean, that that will pay off hopefully because they'll watch the tape back and go, right, I know what I need to do next time now. But on the afternoon, we just basically invited Stad onto us, a Stad team that had a lot of players on that bench who'd started away at Claremont the week before in the top 14. Like they didn't. We thought they would go even weaker than they did. They pretty much went 50-50 in terms of the players who usually play for them week in, week out, and bringing a couple of new faces in. But it certainly wasn't some of the French teams we've seen over the last few years where they're calling like random blokes out of cafes across the road to sit on the bench for them. So that's certainly where it went wrong in the second half for me. But I have to agree that there was a lot to like from those players, and it was overall pretty sort of positive despite the scoreline, the heavy defeat nature of it in the end.
I think that's the thing, though, isn't it?
Also, go on, son.
You don't want to give the one thing you don't want to give any side, but particularly a French side at home, is momentum.
Yeah.
And you just looking back, go if we just held them for like 5-10 minutes, they start to get a bit nervy. Even in the first half, you could tell there was a bit of frustration. Passes weren't going to hand. Things weren't quite working. The longer we could keep them like that, the more not desperate they become. The more the higher risk maybe they would go to try and get the result. And it just felt it was such a sickener, that opening. But as you say, Dan, if those players can take the good and not lose what they did brilliantly, which was that level of ambition to attack and show no fear and be brave in those situations, but temper that with just that, as you said, there was a couple of times where Wild, he just smashed the ball downfield. It's terrible ball, just whack it right down the middle and then reset defensively. And it's actually what we've done really well this season because we were containing them around the halfway line at times. So, yeah, I think, but, my rant about Europe is I would love to be playing them this weekend at home with all our players in, because I genuinely think one or two more experienced heads and they would have been in trouble on Saturday. So the way that Europe now works takes away that kind of, well, we'll see you back at ours next week and we'll have a different team and we'll have another go at you. And, we maybe will take those points away because now we're playing Ulster next week in what is basically a brand new game that is, bears no relevance to the game that's gone the weekend before because there's no kind of rivalry built up in it. So, kind of left thinking, I'd love to have those, however many players we had out, back in the side and have a go at them on Saturday.
And we'd have to get Paul Tito back because that's the image I've got of Stade Francais at home is Paul Tito scoring in the corner. So we'd have to haul him out of retirement from somewhere. Obviously, Cardiff made a lot of changes. 4D, they didn't in the end bring back any of the Wales internationals who'd started in camp, regardless of how many minutes they played. Sheedy and Danny Southworth not really getting many minutes. Beetham not playing at all, was still given a week off. We also opted to rest guys like Bowen, Winnett, Millard, Ali Davis, who've played quite a lot for us. Do we sort of see where Cornel Van Zyl's coming from in that decision to make wholesale changes?
I see it to an extent. I was a bit surprised, kind of the lack of uh, the element of just not allowing any of the Wales players who are involved to play. I think I get the need to experiment. I think particularly you look at like last season in the Challenge Cup, that's where Tom Bowen and Steph Manuel both made their debut was in Challenge Cup games, and it's probably your best chance to kind of try new combinations, especially with how the league's going. There's no real easy games going forward, so it's probably your best chance to test some new players. But I feel like by that same logic, someone like Jacob Beetham, who's kind of been in camp for 5 weeks holding tackle bags, you think if I know Matty Young had a brilliant game, but if we're looking to experiment with Jacob Beetham in a different position, for example, say 12 or 13, that was probably a great game to do it. So while I kind of understand why it was done, I think there was maybe a little bit of a missed opportunity there, particularly with possibly having some Welsh players on the bench just as an extra impact. And like Simon touched upon, having more kind of leadership coming off the bench and more experienced players. But I think we'll fully find out like what the bigger picture is when we know what the team is for Ulster this Saturday.
Fraser, we've spoken a bit obviously about how bad it went in the second half, but that first half we played some terrific rugby. Was that our best attacking performance of the season so far?
I'm not sure if I would say it was our best. I think those tries were really nice and like really well worked. And yeah, we looked clinical when we had the chances, and some of the passes were beautiful, perfectly judged. Maya Young's offload, and it was just good to see those players like Ewan Stevens and Mason Grady like back. I'm excited about Ewan Stevens. I hope he gets his fitness back because he is electric when he gets a little bit of space, and he's going to be exciting. Um, but no, I think it just exemplified the skill set that our players do have in the back line in particular. And there's a really high ceiling. So we showcased that we, with the ball, with those young players, then even with these changes, we can still come up with really beautiful moves and score some really good tries. But I guess it's the consistency of being able to do that across the rest of the game, which we obviously didn't see. So I think they were good moves, good individual moments of attack. But I think overall, I think we didn't really keep it, keep it going for the rest of the game. So I think that takes it away a little bit from that attacking performance. Um, and yeah, it's difficult when Lloyd going off early was quite a blow. Even though Harry played well, that is quite a significant change you've got to put up with.
Yeah, Lloyd obviously going off with a shoulder injury. Fordy, I think you put on the group afterwards. You'd been told he was in a sling after the game as well, which that's probably not a great sign for him being fit at any point over the festive period as well. So a bit of a blow for Cornel Van Zyl to deal with. Simon, just going through a couple of the players where the squad was changed. There was a few players obviously on debuts mentioned, quite a few players making their sort of first starts of the season as well and coming back in after injury. You mentioned on Twitter, or sorry, on Blue Sky, that you thought Roy Thornton had a decent game coming back in for his first start of the season. What did you make of him?
Yeah, I mean, I think he showed up, particularly around kind of holding their players up in our 22, and there's a couple around halfway. I think he just got through a lot of work, and you're not going to get the most dynamic ball carrier there, but the lineout seemed to go okay from what I can remember. Um, uh, yeah, I just thought you kind of fitted in. It wasn't kind of like, oh well, we're really considering we're really missing Teddy Williams. I think we miss him offensively as well in terms of what he brings. Is um, the way he can disguise a pass and things like that. I think we've missed that, and I wonder whether our attack has become slightly disjointed since then, because I think he plays quite a key role in that in fixing defences. So when you're missing a player like that, obviously Knott had been the favoured partner for McNally, who just keeps going and going and going. Although he did look knackered on, and I'm glad he got a bit of a rest on. I'm sure he really wanted to play as well. I'm sure those are the games that he wants to be part of. So yeah, I just thought he had a really solid game, and it just made me think. Actually, yeah, we can trust him in those situations. I know he's one of the more experienced players. He's not had a lot of game time, but I didn't feel at any point it was he looked kind of out of sorts or out of place. So I thought he had a really solid game. It wasn't spectacular, but he certainly contributed to what's in the first half. Definitely was a huge forward effort, a huge number of tackles, some massive tackles going in. I think there was the period where Grady rearranged their wingers' ribs that I could hear at the back of the stand where I was sat, with lots of kind of Gaelic oohs in terms of that. And then I think the play went the other way, and either Stevens got hammered on the other side of the pitch, or he put in a big hit, and then Bevan got hit. It was like three kind of in the space of like 5 minutes, where it really kind of showed how physical that game was. So yeah, I thought he had a good game, and yeah, as we're missing Teddy for what I assume will be most of the season, it's good to know you can bring him in, because he does add that height to the line-out and weight to the scrum as well, which you need against the kind of bigger packs and more set-piece orientated sides.
There was a question on Twitter, I think, from Gareth, who mentioned about that we're looking quite light at lock now, and whether Cornell could ring up Eben, but I'm not sure Eben's the guy to go to now. Really, he's got a few weeks off, so maybe somebody else he could call him. But yeah, I thought Thornton looked pretty decent, considering I don't know if he's actually had any minutes at all this season so far. That might have been his first minutes of the season, off the top of my head. 4D. Bevan was another player, Ellis Bevan, coming in at scrum half for his first Cardiff start of the season. He's obviously played a little bit for Bristol over the last few weeks on loan. That seemed to have paid off a little bit for him, I thought.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's kind of that live wire that with Mulder out, when you kind of look at the options there of obviously Ian Davis came off the bench, but usually your starting choice scrum half now is straight shootout between Ellis Bevan and Alan Davis. And Ellis Bevan's much of a live wire that's kind of got that similar running rugby game to Johan Mulder. So it's a nice kind of chance for him. It was a nice chance for him on Saturday to get some minutes under his belt after not featuring at all, I don't think, in the first block. And yeah, you can see there's definitely an element of it's probably benefited him massively being at Bristol. I do think there were some moments where he looked like probably wasn't kind of used to the pace of the game. I think there was a couple of instances where he kind of pulled up a little bit short when running with the ball, got caught in situations where you'd think maybe 2 years ago he wouldn't have been caught. And I think that's just because he hasn't been playing much rugby. But I think he's going to be a huge part kind of going into this Saturday and over the festive derbies. I think he's going to play a huge part, whether that's starting or coming off the bench.
Fraser, then we had two very similar questions come in before the pod. So Sean says, we look stacked at 15 with Winnett, Beetham, Halfpenny returning. Bit of a spoiler alert for the news there. And Matty Young stepping up versus Stad. Where do we see Beetham long term? And Craig on Reddit says, how much of a struggle is it going to be to balance the development of Winnett, Beetham, and now Young at 15? Are we resigned to losing one, or does it speed up the need to figure out Beetham's suitability to play another position? What do we think on those fronts?
I think Beetham I think he's an unusual player because he hasn't really got much game time quite a while, and but there's a lot of excitement and potential over him. And we've mixed and matched. So we played at 13 last time we saw him, I think for Cardiff. But I think he's going to be utilised in different positions. I think if he's got that flexibility, whereas Matty Young, I think he's a fullback. That's his position. Winnett similarly, I think that's their positions. And Halfpenny, we'll see. But yeah, I think they're going to have to integrate Beetham into different positions. If we do want to keep him, you can't just keep him, have this line of young 15s and just not play Matty Young until the next Challenge Cup block. So I think we are going to see Beetham maybe tried out in different areas, 13 in particular, with Millard, main 13 who's not 13 and who is now like established, set, concrete he is at 13. No, we didn't really see that coming from the start of the season that he was going to be that player. I'm not sure if Mason Grady. I think he's remaining a winger based on what I see. So I think maybe we are going to see Beetham uh, chosen in different positions, and that'll free up hopefully, Matty Young to get a bit more game time because he looked impressive, and it will only get better with more minutes in professional rugby.
You get the feeling that Winnett and Young are very similar types of players. The way they play the game in terms of their first instinct, certainly from what I saw on Saturday, that's the first time I've really seen it, is offensively minded, is to kind of get up under the high ball. Not the biggest players in the world, but good footwork. Prepared to be kind of brave and offload and that kind of thing. So you do. It does make me think of where Beetham fits in this, and whether he does need to move if he wants game, either move from Cardiff or move position. I think he needs. The coaching staff at Cardiff and at Wales need to make a decision on what position he plays, because otherwise the risk is he drifts around 3 or 4 positions, never quite nailing one down, never quite having the run at that position to learn it in a high octane environment at the highest level. And before you know it, he's 28. He's got 16 caps, but has never quite nailed down. Everyone thinks he's got potential still, but he's kind of quite old. So I think whether it's the rest of this season or if he's still with us next season or wherever he is, just need to pick him in a position and play him in that position, because I think otherwise his development's going to struggle, and you can understand him becoming frustrated then, going, well, you just keep picking me in possessions for like 1 week and then somewhere else the next week. I can't learn my trade.
Yeah, and the sort of nagging thing element of that all is that if we do go to 3 teams and there is less spots for players to play, but also if it is the Dragons, Cardiff, and then one in the West, the Dragons are going to need to improve a lot. If anyone watched them play against Perpignan on the weekend, I think the Dragons Lair guys tweeted afterwards that like they are the worst team in Europe at the moment, the Dragons, and there's not really much you can argue with on that front. They are going to need to recruit better players and bolster their squad. They're probably not gonna. We're not going to attract a huge amount of Welsh players back from England immediately. I don't feel it's probably more likely that we lose more players to England, if anything. Beetham would probably be a candidate to go over there potentially, and that's the risk. But if he's going to make it as a fullback in Wales, you get the feeling that the Dragons is the spot where he might end up landing. Who have Angus O'Brien's been a good player for them, but is probably not of the requisite quality to drag them up the table. Kai Evans has had a lot of injuries there and hasn't really made the grade. They do have Hugh Anderson. Not really sure what's happened to him this season. We haven't seen a huge amount of him, but you're going to need 2 quality players. So if it's Beetham and Anderson there, and then we've got Winnett and Young, as tough as that is to say from a Cardiff perspective, because you want to keep as much talent and build as much depth as you can. If Welsh Rugby is going to make a real fist of this 3 team element, though, then somebody like Beetham moving to Dragons, you think that's probably on the cards potentially, especially if they are going to stick with him at 15. But I think there's a lot of legal battles before we start figuring out who plays for who first.
It's really unfortunate, isn't it? Because Young plays pretty much 80 minutes at the weekend. I don't think Beetham's been given 80 in that position. Has he played an entire game at fullback? Did he have 1 or 2?
I want to say, was it Munster to be starting
Yeah,
at fullback
was he
in
starting at
Munster?
fullback
But
there?
I don't recall if he spent the whole game. I mean, certainly what he hasn't had is 2 games on the
Yeah,
bounce at 15, which Young is a young guy. He might not get that straight away, but you kind of think he's the more likely now to get that run at 15 than Beetham would be in this Cardiff team at the moment.
There must be some doubts about him at fullback. It doesn't really make sense because he's older than Winnett as well, so he really should be higher in the pecking order than Winnett. And it is unusual because he doesn't get the opportunity. I know he's had injuries, which obviously curtailed his development and inclusion in the team, but there must be something that the Cardiff coaches see that means that they don't fully trust him as a 15 at this point in time. I don't know, but
He's also noticeable because he didn't play a minute for Wales either. That people came in that last week of camp before the South Africa game and got the nod, and Beetham didn't, and that the incumbent fullback was having quite a tough time of it as well during that test series, and Beetham still wasn't preferred over him, despite the fact that the issues Murray were having was where Beetham you think probably wouldn't have, in that Beetham's just naturally like a good few inches taller than Murray is. So yeah, there's no doubt that that year that he lost with the ACL was a right killer blow, because I mean the player that he was for the Rags before that, you watched him play it from the very moment he stepped into the Rags team. You're like, this guy's too good for this already. Like he's not even that. Players like Matty Young and Ben Thomas and James Botham took, by the end of their first season, you were like, okay, he's now too good. He's had a good run for the Rags. Whereas Beetham stepped in and you were like, he's doing things which you would expect top pros stepping down to the semi-pro level to be doing, chipping and chasing and fending off lads. And that, yeah, he's come back from that knee injury, and it's obviously taken him a bit of time to get used to it. But yeah, it'd be an interesting one to watch, because there's absolutely no doubt that there's talent there and there's attributes there that Wales desperately need as well, not just Cardiff, but Wales are after. But yeah, there's certainly at the same time a question mark over the direction his career is going in at the moment, and whether a move or whether an official position change is required. I'm not sure, but
he's got a massive boot as well.
Yeah,
if he'd been on the bench on Saturday, could you have brought him on in a 13 or a 12, move Schmidt to 12 or whatever, or even at fullback, and just gone, we're starting to lose control of this. Just give it to Beetham and let him whack it, and let's just get upfield.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what it was really strange the first time. I think there was a wind coming from one end to the other, because all our kicks in the first half were really short. They didn't seem to go very far. So again, it feels like a missed opportunity Saturday for him, considering he's played no minutes. What is the point of him not playing on Saturday? When we've got so little experience on the bench. I don't know whether did Wales insist that everybody gets a week break. I know training intensity is pretty hard, but for us to, it just doesn't feel right, because we haven't seen that player.
Yeah, there was no sign of,
which is a massive shame, because he's obviously he's got the physical attributes and the talent, but it's just not showing at the moment.
No sign of insistence in the WRU. I think at least one Wales player played for each of the other clubs this weekend, and yeah, I agree that it is obviously a mental toll being in camp and being up at the Vale and training to that level is a step up. But you kind of think playing against Stade, and then we'd have had Win It back this weekend. Halfpenny, spoiler, is available. You could have given Beetham this week off then and said to him, have your recovery this week instead, and then come back ready for the derbies after that. But yeah, well, we shall see how that goes. Any more from the Stade game? No, all good. I just wanted to highlight two players quickly. I thought Evan Lloyd had probably the best performance of his career so far. Solid in the line now, but looked great around the park. Consider that was his first start of the season as well, which I hadn't realised. He hadn't really featured a huge amount prior to the autumn internationals. Obviously, gets the call up for the South Africa game, but it was only for that week, so they brought him straight back in. But some of his carrying, some of his passing as well.
Yeah.
We're looking for a 10 with Ewan Lloyd unavailable.
His
There was a
stepping
ball
game.
over the top.
He did some steps as well. He stepped two forwards. He is quality. Evan Lloyd, I agree with you. He's a physical presence as well, massive.
He will get with some injuries. I think he will get plenty of game time over the next few weeks. So hopefully, you can take advantage of that. And then the other player was, James Botham was just, I know, was mentioned in one of the 3 word thoughts. The man mountain. He is so good. When he is fit and available, there are few better back rowers in Wales, which is quite an accolade considering we've got quite a lot of good back rowers in Wales. But yeah, 6, 7, or 8 over the ball, holding people up, carrying, line out work, just looks fantastic.
And I guess the one thing we haven't talked about is how their tight head didn't get a card for what looked like either a swinging arm or a shoulder to the head. And the referee going, well, he tried to wrap. And I think that, does that really matter if you've hit somebody in the head? It's not about whether you've wrapped or not. It's about where you make contact. And just a bizarre decision for it to kind of almost, watching the game back and listening to the conversation, the intent to go into it with he stepped. I'm like, well, that's not mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody stepping and not mitigation, you're still high. Surely it's about the reducing height rather than stepping. And there was no reduction in height. He was at he was always going up. again, it just felt like a moment that we get 10 minutes with one of their tight heads off. Can we get that other try that just puts us 15-5 up at half time? And it's one of those again where you just cynically feel if it was a Cardiff player doing that, it would have been 10 minutes and a review. I don't know how they got to the decision that it was just it was just like a rugby collision. It was high when he was giving high tackles for like Mason Grady earlier, where Mason Grady seemingly tried to get a piggyback off the winger and his arm just slipped up kind of round the neck, but it wasn't like particularly high. It just felt very strange, a very strange decision.
Yeah, I don't like to linger too much on refereeing decisions on the pod, but it was a red card. I'll just go a bit further to say I don't see any mitigation. He's plunked his shoulder straight on Botham's chin, was always upright. I don't really understand how there was no card. I thought Grady might have had a yellow on the other day, actually. I thought the one replay that if he copped the yellow for that, he might not have been able to complain. But yeah, that one, I haven't seen if there's been any sightings and stuff from the Challenge Cup this weekend and whether he did get cited that prop. And I also don't know. I assume they're doing 20-minute red cards because everybody is now, and that probably would have been one of those. But yeah, I found that a totally bizarre decision, and the explanation even weirder. Like, as long as you throw your arms out there somewhere, you can plank your shoulder wherever you want, according to that explanation from that referee. So.
Just hug people around the head, and then that's fine. It's
very, very bizarre. But yeah, I thought there was some odd refereeing all weekend. I think that's maybe the slight issue with the Challenge Cup is I don't know who that referee was. He was English, I think, but I've not seen him on any sort of Prem game.
I thought he was Irish.
Yeah, he's Irish.
Oh, he was Irish, was he?
No,
that explains it then.
Northern Ireland.
But no, I'd never seen him before in any game. I think you do find, especially with us in the Challenge Cup, you get a few random blokes wheeled out for our level of games who perhaps haven't got a huge amount of top level experience, but. We shall move on with that. We don't want to come across all South African and point out to the referee. That's that for that game. Then moving on to a bit of news. We've got one new sign in which, at the time of recording, I don't think the club have officially come out with yet, but we've had to go ahead to mention it, having spotted him in the warm-up on Saturday as a travelling reserve. Ethan Lewis is back with Cardiff, the hooker who's come back from the Ospreys on a short-term loan deal. He, of course, graduated the academy here, made 60 appearances before going to Saracens end of 2021-22 season on loan and then staying there permanently for the year after. He came back to Wales with the Ospreys in 2023 and has been there ever since, but is down the pecking order a little bit there with guys like Sam Parry, Lewis Lloyd playing quite regularly. Evan Daniels obviously gone there from us last season and I think jumped him a bit as well. So he comes back in, which leads on to my fitness update, which is Liam Belcher is out with a neck injury at the moment, having come back from the Wales camp injured. Cornel Van Zyl said last week they're hoping to get him back before New Year, which is presumably where Ethan Lewis comes in as cover for that period. And there's a similar time frame on Tulibi Faletau and his knee injury. Obviously, with Faletau, as you mentioned last week, the Faletau rule is until they tell us he's fit. We'll just assume he's constantly rehabbing something at the moment. But it'd be great to get one or both of them back for at least that Ospreys game on New Year's Day to bolster the pack there. Lee Halfpenny then, as we've mentioned a couple of times on the pod already, he's been confirmed as staying on in his player coach role. He joined on a short-term deal at the start of the season, was rehabbing a calf injury at the time, so just doing his coaching stuff, but has now come through rehab and is available for selection this weekend. We'll get onto our team selection at the end of the pod, but how we use him and where we use him, but he is now putting his hand up for selection. And then the final piece of news is that appearing on the Rags website is a game against Wales under-20s on Friday the 16th of January, 7:15 kick-off at the Arms Park. No announcement that I've seen yet from Cardiff or from the WRU, so we'll wait to see exact details of that. But they have made a bit of a thing over the last few years of playing SRC sides in the build-up to the under-26 nations, so be a good evening down at the Arms Park. That one. At this point of the pod then, if you're enjoying what you're listening to, please feel free to like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're on. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the Rap channel and to the Global Gameline channel as well. Leave us a review on your podcasting app. Leave us a comment on YouTube and we'll read them out if they're nice. Moving on to Rags Corner. Another loss for the Rags on Saturday, 22-28 at home Against RGC, tries from Alan Rees, Joe Goodchild, Gavin Parry, 7 points from Stefan Crimp. At fly half, a similar sort of tale for the Rags, who were 15-7 and 22-21 up in the second half, but couldn't hold on as RGC scored late on for their first win down here in a good number of years. Next up for Fishy's men is a trip to Carmarthen Thursday night in front of the S4C online cameras. 7:30 kickoff that one. Carmarthen, of course, won 33-36 at the Arms Park, also in front of the SRC cameras, back S4C cameras back in September. So hopefully they can avenge that. If they're going to do it, though, they'll have to do it without their Wales under-20s contingent. 20s are playing a training type match, I think, against Scotland at Merthyr on Friday. So definitely guys like Lloyd Lucas, Sean Davis, Oshan Darwin Lewis, and Reese Cummins still available. I think Tom Cottle might still be of age to play for the under-20s as well next season. So he could well be involved. It remains to be seen whether Harry Wild, Sean Davis, etc. will go back to the Rags for that short turnaround, having played in Paris on Saturday, or whether they'll stay with the first team, perhaps. Who knows after their performances. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what sort of team Fishy takes up there. Elsewhere in the pathway is a number of finals this week as under 16s and under 18s come towards the end of their first block. So we've got in the Dewar Shield, Pontypridd, representing the Cardiff region, will play Llanelli in the stadium on Thursday evening, 7:30 kickoff. The Dewar Challenge final was on Monday night. Cardiff Black lost 2022 to Neath in that one, unlucky to them. The Dewar Plate final, Cardiff Blue will play Swansea West on Friday, 6 p.m. kickoff at Sardis Road. And then the big one this week, the WRU College League under 18 final, Coleg y Cymoedd will face Ysgol Glantaf Wednesday night, 7:30. I think S4C Online are covering that as well. 40, well, give us your Glantaf hype moment. Are they going to do it at long last?
Yeah, I hope so. Well, yeah, excuse me. I'll be down there, supporting them on. I haven't. I think last time I've gone to watch them at either the Principality or the Arms Park, they've lost both times. So hopefully, third time's a charm.
If it's going bad at half time, you just see 40 slinking out on the SRC cameras as it goes up. But there were some good semi-finals last week. Cymoedd beat Llandovery College at Sardis. A couple of Johan Dacey, nephew of Chris, scoring a try for them. Ben Coomer kicking a couple of points from fly half as well, who's involved in the academy, and then Glantaf hammered Whitchurch in the other semi-final. Tom Howe bagging 2 tries as part of that scoring. So Cymoedd and Glantaf drew 29-all a couple of weeks ago in the regular season. So it'd be a very good game that, but positive for Cardiff Pathway to have so many teams in so many finals. Moving on then to the final part of the pod, we'll look ahead to this Saturday's game against Ulster, 8 p.m. kickoff at the Arms Park. Obviously, we beat Ulster at the Arms Park last season, 21-19, in a great game, second half comeback. But we'd lost a lot before that. That was our first win over them in 6 years. Hopefully, we can keep that up. Ulster are having a very good season after a couple of troubling years. They're fourth in the URC at the moment with a game in hand over ourselves, which would jump them above us if they were to win it after their game against Edinburgh was called off a couple of weeks ago. In Europe, they beat Racing, or I should say a Racing 15, because it wasn't particularly the strongest Racing side I've ever seen that travelled to Belfast. But you can only beat what's in front of you, and they beat them 61-7, which is, I think, comes under the title of convincing victory for the Irish side. Team news wise for them, Rob Herring is going to miss the game. He hurt his knee early on in that game against Racing last week. But Cormac Isachukwu, Ben Carson, Lachlan McLaughlin, and Sean Reffel are all fit. I recognise Isachukwu's name because I think he was the guy who kicked the ball out of Thomas Young's hand in that game a couple of seasons ago. The others, I don't know, answers on a postcard really. But I think it'll be interesting to see what Ulster side comes over. They picked a very strong team for their opening home game last week with a couple of guys like Nick Timoney and coming back from the Ireland squad, Angus Bell coming straight back from the Australian squad as well. They, like us, have got 3 derbies coming up in the URC. They start away at Leinster at the Aviva next weekend. So it might be possible that having gone hard and got the bonus point win at home, they send a bit of a change side to us before going into those 3 interprovincial games. But we'll wait to see for the team announcement on their end. Question from Tony of this parish on Reddit said, "What's the weather like?" Bad. Tony. It's the only thing I can say. The weather's just bad at the moment, all right? Somebody needs to do something about it because it's not looking good. But that's get your coats on, get your umbrellas out because it's not looking great at the Arms Park on Friday night. Question in from Gareth Simon, who said it was an understandable team selection v Stad, he felt, but do we now go all in against Ulster and get the bonus point win to really ignite this European Challenge Cup campaigning for us?
I say this every time, just go for it. Every time they don't. But I think you've got to think about this game in relation to what's up next. You don't want to be going into a Friday night against the Scarlets and then Boxing Day against the Dragons. And then obviously on New Year's Day against the Ospreys on the back of 2 defeats. Because it undoes all the work that got us here. The other thing I think is that Ulster are going to be one of those sides that are going to be there and thereabouts in playoff time. We go away to them last game before the Six Nations. So I think we just, around us not having our Six Nations Wales squad players at that point. So I think we want to put a bit of doubt in their mind. I think they're kind of a direct competitor for us, considering where we are this season. Not usually. I think I read somewhere this was their first game in the Challenge Cup or something like that. Have they been in the Challenge Cup before? Have they always been? They kind of always been.
Yeah, possibly haven't. I can't really think of a time where they haven't qualified for the top competition before.
Yeah, so they get to enjoy this competition as much as we do every year. So it'll be interesting to see what they bring. I would be surprised if it's not as close to a full strength side that we put out, just to get everybody back working to take some momentum into the game against the Scarlets, which I don't think, even though the Scarlets have had a pretty disastrous start to the season, they always turn up at Cardiff and make it difficult for us. So I think you've got to look at it with that in mind, regardless of kind of, do we need a bonus point or don't we? I think a bonus point win puts us back in contention. A win is fine. I think a win by any stretch would be really more than fine. It would be a really good point. It keeps the Arms Park as somewhere that teams don't like to come with no pushovers there. So, and considering we were awful in that first half against them last year, where they turned around 19-0 down, we were dreadful, and they fell apart really. But I think they were having that type of season last season as well, where they just crumbled at points. So, it'd be good to put a marker down psychologically with them as well.
4D, I suppose on the flip side, is there a chance that Cornel van Zyl could go changed again and basically sort of say we're just not going for Europe at all this season? We're going to put all our eggs in the league basket, and would we get on board with that, or is this a game where we do have to go full strength?
I think the way I see it is if Cornel van Zyl wants to kind of throw Europe away, I still think with this game, with the derbies coming up straight after, he can't just kind of name like a second string squad and just throw them out there hoping to lose. I think you need kind of, especially, for example, Sheedy's going to be involved anyway, regardless, with Johan Lloyd out injured, but you kind of need those players involved who are going to have a big part to play in these festive derbies after. I think there's plenty of players who haven't played properly for a while. If you give them a few minutes, even if it's off the bench, it sets the tone a bit going into these festive derbies. I'd understand it a little bit if Cornel van Zyl felt that he'd be happy to throw Europe away to concentrate on the league. But I worry that we might have this discussion come the end of the season where if we're just outside the playoff spots and we're thinking, oh, we could have had a chance for a decent run in Europe, and we could have been having a bit of a run to Bilbao again. It'll be quite a frustrating conversation to have at that point in time.
Fraser, I think Simon mentioned it a little bit there. Is there a danger that the wheels do just fall off if we lose again this weekend, especially losing that winning record at home? Is like we could go into that Scarlets game and be like, oh, we have absolutely messed this up now because of our approach to the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to hope that the team's got a stronger mentality than that at this point, and they're quite a tight unit. It's been years in development, the team that has kind of come to fruition. So I think it depends on how we lose. If we do lose, obviously it would be a blow, and again it depends on like how Cornel Van Zyl approaches the game and who he puts out as to how the team can react to a loss. If they're like, oh, we're playing a second string again, so we weren't expecting to get the win, then you maybe can paint it in a less disastrous way. But I think we definitely need to put in a performance and push Ulster to well, ideally win, but like be in there at the end because I think against Stad it was just a bit for me a bit disappointing that we just weren't at the end of the game. It was over as a contest. I think with this match, even if we make some changes, I think we need to have it as a contest until the last 10 minutes, and we're in there within a score, and then we see what happens. So yeah, I think it is that I think that's important because we don't want to be going into against Scarlets having been not really in a match for 2 games and have lost quite soundly. I think that would be quite demoralizing, and then you start getting the jitters about like, oh God, we need to beat Scarlets, we need to get back on the horse and that kind of stuff. And yeah, we don't want it to kind of affect our league form. So I'd agree that it is important to put a strong performance in for sure.
Team selection wise, then there's a few players who maybe got a few question marks over they might be back this week. We don't know at this point when we're recording, but I've ruled out for us for our team selection Ed Byrne and Corey Domachowski. We mentioned Liam Belcher, Teddy Williams also long term. I've ruled out Ben Donnell as well, who wasn't involved last week at all. So we assume that his injury picked up against Zebra was enough to keep him sidelined for now. Faletau we've mentioned. Johan Mulder's still recovering from his broken jaw. I think the earliest he might be back is Scarlets next week, so hopefully that's going well for him. Ewan Lloyd, that looked like a pretty nasty shoulder injury, as we've mentioned, so he could be set for a little spell out. Rory Jennings, there's still no sign of him, and Theo Cabango is still in a sort of never-ending rehab phase he's been going through for about 3 years now, I think, either side of one or two little appearances. So obviously a couple of key players out there, but not the lengthy injury list that we've certainly had at points coming into festive periods over the last few seasons. Simon, coming to you, we'll start up front. I think I think it's probably the 6 players who most would expect to be involved are Rhys Barrett or Danny Southworth at loose head, Evan Lloyd or Dav Hughes at hooker, and then Javan Sebastian or Kieran Azarati at tight head. Do you go along with that, or do you think that guys like Johan Emmanuel, Ethan Lewis, Sam Wainwright could still be in the mix there if he's not quite going full at it?
I think maybe the one would be Azarati, just because he had a tough autumn in terms of playing those games. I think in the last game he came off and came back on again as well. So
Yeah.
you would kind of maybe go, we've got 3 tight heads that you could probably start Sebastian this weekend. He's a try-scoring machine, isn't he, for us? So we've said it many times. He's let no one down so far. So why wouldn't you start with him? And then, I'd be tempted to keep the same front row as we had on Saturday, to be honest, because they seem to go relatively well. I think there was one scrum where we just melted, or they melted us, which is probably closer. I think they ended up closer to where our hotel was by the end of it than actually in the Stag ground. But so I'd be tempted to go with the same, just switch. Was it Wainwright started on Saturday, didn't he? I'd switch Sebastian and Wainwright round, and maybe keep the other 2 in position. But then again, if Dav Hughes plays, I'm not kind of like, oh, that's a real step down. He obviously had a great game out in Parma. But because Evan had such a good game and looked dynamic and strong and hungry for the ball, and I think you just got to reward that psychologically a bit, is what I'd probably lean towards. And then
Southworth
I think
onto the
it's a
bench.
toss up for the other 2. I mean, I'd probably go Barrett. I'd keep the front row, those 2, and bring in Sebastian, and then have the others on the bench.
Yeah, I have to say Barrett's been really impressive. We saw how like the potential that he had in that spell he had last season. I think he's kicked on again, even in the appearances that we've seen him this season. He's still only 23, very young for a prop, but his upward curve is very steep at the moment every time he plays. So yeah, no issue with that at all. Second row, then I think there's a couple of questions for D about McNally. Like, does he get a rest at some point, or when he came on the pod, he just said, "No, I'm never," like the Roy Keane thing of rotate other people, but you don't drop me. I'm just going to play every week. With McNally, Nott, and Thornton there, which way are you going with those three?
I've got penciled in McNally and Not. I think I think it was a very useful thing of him starting on Saturday when you had so many youngsters playing that you've got that kind of natural leader starting still. And yeah, interesting to see what the team has picked this weekend. But I just think it's almost like we say every week, especially when Teddy was fit, it was almost no discussion. And I feel as long as McNally's fit, he's almost that glue at times that I think for me he's got to start. And yeah, I'd go for George Knott, but as discussed earlier, I thought Thornton did play very well on Saturday too. So, but yeah, I'd have Thornton penciled in on the bench.
I think McNally he came off, he got 20 minutes rest last week. So that's pretty substantial, to be fair.
That's him for this. He can play every minute for the
Yeah.
rest of the season. I do though think that I would go McNally not as well, and then Thornton for McNally again would probably be my sub with McNally not having started on the bench last week. If you bring Thornton on for McNally early-ish, like I think he is a guy. He sort of said it in like a half joking way that I just want to play every week, but I do generally think like he just does. He needs to play every week to like keep himself going type thing. He's much. If it would actually be more damaging to him to stop for a week and like just his body not be used to playing than it is to keep to rest him and then bring him back. So
I think you are
um
right though. They're down just around. I think he gets like an hour
yeah,
because I think it will be really problematic if we lose him because
yeah,
the intensity of those next three games, not only the emotion of them, it's going to be physical and there's short turnaround times between each of them that you kind of you hope that we build up enough of a lead that we can do that, because he did look a bit leggy. There was some uncharacteristic, not mistakes, but not quite being in the right position, which I don't know whether that was just tiredness or the intensity of the game or whatever. He got through so much work again. So I think if you are picking him, you're looking to have him off.
a die young predetermined substitution coming up.
Whatever happens, 60 minutes and then off, yeah.
Fraser, the back row, then we're back to a lot of options all of a sudden. We mentioned off air, I'm mentioning now that Tame Basham did come off sort of near a physio last weekend as in close proximity to one. We haven't really spotted anything that suggested he did pick up a knock and he seemed to walk off fine. But so we'll include him in our possibles of playing this week, but he may not make it in real life. But we've got Mann potentially coming back in, both of them, Dan Thomas, Basham, Big Al Lawrence, obviously captain side last week was great to see, and put in. I think he topped the carry and tackle stats again. Like where we're like penciling guys in for our team every week, the stat guys are just penciling Lawrence in at the top of them now. I think each week. Which way are you going with your back row selection?
Well, I guess I was going to question whether Big Al gets a rest because he does seem to, well, he puts in so much effort every game and he puts his body about, and yeah, played the full 80 right last week. So I would be concerned about him getting injured because he is our main number 8 with Falatau kind of doing what the hell he wants, picking and choosing his games, which is fair enough. But so I was maybe thinking of giving him a rest, and if Basham is fit, maybe like him at 8, and then I'd love to see Alex Mann back, but again, he had a pretty rough autumn, in terms of the work he went through. So I'm not sure. I would ideally have him back and maybe both of them at 7. That's kind of, but there's quite a few options there. But I think provisionally that would be what I'd go for, and I think that's quite a solid back row.
And then Dan Thomas 20 jersey, or you is Lawrence resting on the bench?
I mean, ideally, yeah, I think Dan Thomas 20 jersey maybe, because then both of them can go to 8. There's the flexibility there, and then just give Big Al just like a proper rest. Um, yeah, because worry about his durability, I suppose.
Yeah, I had the same question about whether Alex Mann rested or not, but I'm just too excited to see a man and both of them like 6-7 combo after how well both of them went last week. Like that is something that will get me to the Arms Park on a rainy Saturday night in December to play some sort of Ulster side. Yeah, that would be very exciting. Simon coming on to half back then. I think Sheedy is pretty much nailed on for 10. Ali Davis back into the reckoning at 9. Does Bevan keep his spot and Davis revert to his bench role, or does Davis's quality mean that he comes straight back in at the 9 jersey for you?
I mean, we could be really maverick and pick Ben Thomas at 10, just to really mix things up a bit. No, I think you're right. Sheedy at 10. I'd pick Davis at 9. I think Bevan did have a really good game last week. Started to show what he can do. I just think the control that we lost in the second half we're going to need, particularly if the weather's pretty awful. I think sometimes Bevan's box kicking can be a bit hit and miss. Sometimes it goes perfectly, sometimes it doesn't go. It goes very high up in the air, but not very far forward. And I just get a feeling against Ulster we're going to have to kick a fair bit, kick sensibly, kick clever, and I'd rather have that experience of those two there with Bevan then to come on for when if we're chasing the game or it breaks up a little bit, he's more of a threat. And that's what we've always said we want to see him around the fringes being more of a threat, and I think he did show that. Yeah, I would go with that.
Bordy into midfield, we've got Ben Thomas coming back into the reckoning at 12 with Steph Emanuel. Got Harry Millard back into the reckoning at outside centre with Cornell Schmidt. Which way are you going there?
I've got penciled in definitely Ben Thomas at 12 because obviously he started the first two Wales autumn games, had 15 minutes against South Africa, but then obviously before the autumn played very little rugby following the red card against the Lions, and obviously he'll be a huge player across the next few games. So I think it's very important to get him starting on Saturday. I've gone for Millard at outside centre. I think just for that kind of, they're a good combo together. And it probably struck a lot of fear, especially the way Millard's been playing at times, struck a lot of fear into the Ulster defensive line, having him there. But yeah, that's what I've gone for. I wouldn't necessarily be disappointed if Smith was chucked in at 13, but I think the better way to go would be Millard at 13.
Fraser, then, before doing the back three as a whole, the big question of this 23 is Lee Halfpenny, and the club have obviously strongly hinted that he will be involved this weekend with the way they announced his signing of a new deal, and there's the sort of narrative of he made his debut against Ulster, he scored his first try, I think he made his second appearance against Ulster then as well, scored his first points against them at the Arms Park. Does he start at fullback for you, or does he start from the bench for this one? Where would you have him?
I think I'd probably start him if you're going to play him, because I'm not sure about bringing him off the bench as just changing fullbacks is kind of a bit of an unusual call, I guess, usually. So I'd probably start him, and if they might want to make a fanfare of come down and see him, they'll announce the team and kind of build on what they've already kind of drip fed in the social media. So I think the plan would be for him to start at 15, and he is he's a safe pair of hands. You know what you're gonna get from him. So I'm not worried about him affecting our performance. I know he hasn't played in ages, but he feels like a bit like the Faletau type player who's he's got all the experience, he knows what he's doing, and then probably sub him off quite early or see how he's doing. But yeah, I don't know. I think he'll probably start if they are going to play him.
It'd be hilarious if they didn't start him at all. He wasn't on the bench. It was just a contract announcement. That was all. We're not playing him. I think what's really interesting is if it's going to be a really tight game, his goal kicking could be quite important, to be honest, if they give him the responsibility on a, what might be a bit of a horrible night, to be able to go, actually, there you go, keep the scoreboard ticking over, would be, quite a weapon to have whenever he would come on. But I think that's what, not having Lloyd causes that problem, doesn't it? Because you put Lloyd on the bench and he can play full-back wing. You covered that both. I don't think we've got a full-back now with either Winnett or Young. Both could, I guess, play wing, but we haven't got that kind of 10-15 cover that one person does too.
There is pressure on Halfpenny with that goal kicking man, because I mean he is the kicking coach for all intents and purposes, and so if he then takes over the goal kicking and misses a load, then like Sheedy and that are turning around, going, I'm not listening to this bloke. What's he talking about?
Who's this guy?
I'm gonna take a wing pairing from each of you here, because I think the quality that we've got available on the wings is quite mad for this weekend all of a sudden. So the choices you've got Mason Grady, Josh Adams, Tom Bowen, and Ewan Stevens retaining his spot. So you got, I don't think it's a bad choice there of any of those four really. But we'll take a consensus, and we probably, if you all vote for different ones, though, I will just like kick you all off the call, and that'll be the end of the podcast. Fraser, what's your pairing?
I think I'd go Josh Adams and Tom Bowen, because Mason Grady can kind of cover positions on the bench. If we have him on the bench, he's got the centre and wing. So yeah, I think that's what I'd go for.
40.
I've gone Iwan Stevens because I want him to replicate the same try he scored against Ulster last season. And then I've gone Josh Adams on the other wing.
Simon.
How can I avoid being kicked off the call? No. Just choose two completely different guys. I would definitely Josh Adams. Probably going to be a lot of rucks in the game, so we've got his experience from ruck school to be able to see how he clears stuff out. No, I think he'll be desperate to play again, which could go either way with him. But I think again we want him up and running for those games. I'm really torn between Bowen and Stevens on the other wing. I think Stevens seemed to pull up a little bit towards the end of the game. I was looking, I know Elijah Evans came on for him, and his leg was quite heavily strapped. So I didn't know if he's got a little bit of a niggle, then I'd wonder whether they'll just pick Bowen because he's coming back from injury. I think Grady's a really interesting one now, because there was a couple of times where I thought he looked, and this is probably just coming back. I think there was one where the ball was kind of went behind him, and I sound like Brian Habana. He was so slow to turn on his wing. It took him a while to kind of get back in. But what he brings is that kind of physical presence, and that it will take him time to get back into it. So I think we'll see him over Christmas. But I do start to wonder whether he needs to start making that transition to 13 now, because his size and his speed, I think, would be really valuable there. And again, it's that Beetham thing. I've always really liked him as a winger. Certainly before he got injured, he looked unplayable at times. But I do just wonder now whether he needs to start moving inside because of what we've got outside of him now in terms of that those wing berths. We're pretty well off there. But whether he'll be on the bench on Saturday, I don't know. Maybe give him another game to run, but I'd go with probably Adams and Bowen, probably, just because I think Stevens, he was struggling a little bit towards the end of the game, is my memory, but I can't remember what of.
And anecdotally, obviously, once again, to confirm, I'm not a doctor, but everybody gets a hamstring injury when they come back from ACL. It just seems to be like the natural way that you do it. You haven't performed like at the top level for so long. You come back in and your hamstring pings, and you need 2 to 3 weeks out to recover from that before you're back again. So maybe that's what happened to him. So we've got Adams. Bowen is the final one. I'm a bit surprised nobody went Adams Grady. putting Grady out on the left there, and with the extra height on a tough weather night as well. But I do think that Grady starting last week was a nod to him not playing this week as one of the only players to do Zebra and Stad back to back. I think that was then saying, yeah, Adams will come straight back in for this one and take that spot. So we've got Adams, Bowen, bench, and I'll fill it in quick. I don't think we'll pick a 10 on the bench. I know some people mention whether Wild stays. I think they'll use Thomas as the 10 cover from 12. So I think there will be Winnett on the bench in case something happens to Halfpenny, or probably likelihood is he's not quite 80-minute fit yet as well, having not played for a while. So I've put Winnett in the 23 jersey, and then bit of a question mark then over who wears 22, whether it's Grady or whether it's Stefan Manuel potentially to cover that inside centre. But I've given it to Grady for now. I think if they do need somebody to step into 12, Grady has done that once or twice. It's not an ideal scenario, admittedly, if Ben Thomas were to go off and they need Grady to go in there. But I think Grady's a better cover there for if Millard was to go down, and then if one of the wingers had an issue as well, then you could put him out there. So I don't think there's quite a two-person option there that covers all of the positions like quite adequately. So it's more about where you're willing to sacrifice slightly, and Grady being the 12 is not the greatest sacrifice that we might encounter at any point. So
What about
also
what
go on.
about Smith in that position?
Yeah,
I mean,
Smith.
he's highly educated.
Yeah.
What we have, so that rugby brain will be able to. But I thought he had, he was okay on Saturday. Made a couple of nice breaks, little chip
Nice
through.
interception.
Yeah, interception. But that was my only question, is because he's 10, 12, 13 wing. Yeah, but hasn't been with us for very long. But I just wonder whether that versatility might kind of tip it in his favour. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm open to that. Any strong thoughts for D Fraser? No. Anyone could play 22.
Yeah.
Well, I'll whack Schmidt in there, and then if it's Grady, I'll look right smug on the WhatsApp group.
This is the level we've got to. If somebody's successful in one of the replacements.
Just doesn't matter about the rest of the team. That
Yeah,
22
exactly.
jersey is the first one I'm looking at.
It's the key jersey.
After all this, it'll probably be wild anyway. So the team we've selected then from 1 to 23: Rhys Barrett, Evan Lloyd, Javon Sebastian, Josh McNally, George Knott, Alex Mann, James Botham, Tame Basham, Aled Davis, Callum Sheedy, Tom Bowen, Ben Thomas, Harry Millard, Josh Adams, Lee Halfpenny, and bench of David Hughes, Danny Southworth, Sam Wainwright, Rory Thornton, Dan Thomas, Ellis Bevan, Cornell Schmidt, and Cam Winnett. I think that is, even if Ulster turn up with their strongest 23, I think I'd back that 23 to get a result there. I don't think there's much else, though. I didn't have any other questions on the sheet going out. Any strong thoughts? Anyone going into the game? Fraser, do we win? In a word,
Go on. Yeah, why not?
4D
Yeah, we win.
and Simon.
Yeah, just
Good,
to annoy the WRU.
Anything that annoys them is good in my book. The only piece of any other business I had was Craig on Reddit, who I think also was in Paris in the weekend, said, not a question, but a statement. Mason Grady drinks Aperol Spritz. Make of that what you will. If you spot any Cardiff players in bars, do feel free to let us know exactly what they're drinking, and we'll judge them heavily for that at some point. Then put them. It might even influence our selections at some point during the season if they're drinking something terrible. But we'll be back next week. We'll look back at the Ulster game. We'll preview the Scarlets, the festive period at large as well. But until then, Fraser, thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers, 4D.
Cheers.
Thanks, Simon.
Right.
And thank you very much for listening. We will speak to you next week.